The veganism, in a lot of ways attracts some of the most, deranged and, lost people in society. You know what I mean? And I feel like even for me, and we said this in the last video, I was looking at the time that I found, YouTube and veganism on YouTube. I was looking for something bigger, a higher power, something to be a part of, And I might be one of the most lost souls on the YouTube here. I mean, I think activism in that traditional sense of, holding rallies and stuff, I don't know if it fits in the world we live in today. There's just too much going on. It would be so hard to get that kind of the right media coverage for something like that. It seems like a waste of time. Not only that, the people that are willing to go out and do that, I'm going to venture off to say that a lot of them are whack jobs, like the guy that doesn't believe in prison, or the, organizers for direct action everywhere. It's kind of, there's no difference there. Maybe I could be a complete idiot for saying this, and this is just a thought, but maybe promoting veganism should be thought of less as activism and more as lifestyle consumerism, trying to kind of just be realistic with the world that we live in. Would it be useful to try to have real political influence, whether it's getting tax breaks, passed for vegan products, or trying to, raise taxes for, companies that are producing non-vegan products and stuff? I mean, I think, those are just two quick examples. Yeah, maybe that's effective. You got to have the right people to do it. Right. I'm going to venture off to say that the majority of us as vegans,
right. But also the question is when, right? Like the type of change you're talking about. Like, Israel is supposedly at 7% vegan. But yeah, it is. To go from 0 to 7 in one generation is a huge change, right? So I don't know, maybe they'll reach 10%. Okay, when you're 10% of the population, maybe then you can bring about some of those changes. But like most countries in the world, we're nowhere near. So that's also a question, is like the tactics change and the priorities change as you change, as the people, the constituency you've got changes. And, and also hopefully the percentage of vegans who are whack jobs, as you say, to use your term, whack job, hopefully that declines just because you're growing and you're getting more people committed who are at least normal people, maybe wonderful people, or what have you. I'm going to mention something out of political history here that to me is interesting. Like, nobody knows this. This is not a well-known thing from political science. Before Karl Marx became famous, like he had a time in his life where he was not yet famous. There was another guy who used the word communist. And like if he had remained famous, like if Karl Marx had died or just didn't get famous, then like history would have gone in a different direction. And this other guy's name was Louis Auguste Blanqui, and his followers were called Blanquists. So, and they called themselves communists. But today, again, communism completely changed when Karl Marx got famous because he became the most famous guy in that. But actually, there was a time when Karl Marx referred to these other people, the followers of Louis Blanqui, and he said, oh no, they're the real communists. And like what Marx was doing was just academic. But Blanqui, this is why I mention him. His fundamental difference from Karl Marx and most of the left-wing people at that time was that he said, no, this stuff with a protest, this stuff with like marching in the streets, this is horseshit. It's bullshit, and it gets everyone put in prison. It accomplishes nothing. Like maybe you wreck some public property or something. You get covered in the newspapers for one day, and then you all go to jail, and nothing changes. His model of social action, this is the term he used. So you can see where this was popular for a short time. I've forgotten. What he said was, no. If you want social change, the best method of organization is conspiracy. And it's a theory that is so brilliantly, beautifully, horrendously believable. And it's like, look, like in our own times, who has changed history more? The people who did the street protests for Occupy Wall Street, or the conspiracy who killed JFK? Whoever you imagine, doesn't matter. Different people put together. But there was a conspiracy, involved various people, involved the CIA or whatever. Doesn't matter. Whatever conspiracy you want to imagine. the tragic thing about history is that most of the time in any century, you can see that change is brought about by conspiracies. Who do you think changes things more? Like the meat and dairy industry. They're organized lobbyists or some vegans having protests. So, the suggestion from Blanqui and this totally different version of communism, he said, no, we don't need a bunch of crazy people protesting in the streets. We don't need a bunch of violent idiots with guns. We need to build a conspiracy of highly educated people who have respectable jobs. So someone who's a lawyer and works in the government who just secretly joins our team. Whatever, any job. The guy who works at the gas station, just all kinds of different isolated people who seemingly have nothing in common, who live in society, who wear a suit and tie, go to work every day, but they're a member of this conspiracy for change. As I say, all of history would be different if, this was what communists had embraced, because ultimately what it entails is the same way. I don't know, why is the oil and gas industry so powerful? Why is the cigarette industry so powerful? Why is the egg industry powerful? I mean, conspiracy, he doesn't mean it just in the limited sense of a criminal activity. He is talking about a form of organizing a political movement. And I mean, the other thing about that is everyone who's a member of the conspiracy gets to live a normal life. I'm not going to tell you who killed JFK, but I'm going to tell you something for sure. They own a ranch and a car, and they have a wife and kids if they want them. They lived a normal life. They didn't put their necks on the line. They didn't live in a cave. Like communist revolutionaries, like a lot of them literally had to live in a cave in the jungle. They didn't live around a campfire. They didn't live in poverty. They lived completely comfortable bourgeois lives, and they changed the history of the world. Now, look, this is not about communism. I mean, I'm not telling you about communism. What's interesting to me is that veganism, it does interest and it does recruit, respectable, professional people. You already see that. You don't see it on YouTube because those people don't want to ruin their lives by making fools of themselves on YouTube. On YouTube, you get to see crazy people like Freely. You get to see the neo-Nazis. You get to see all these different extremes. It is what it is. But they're out there, and I know because a lot of them are writing me email. So that's also interesting to me, is to say, look, there are alternatives. And, we're not the first generation in history to look around and say, hey, maybe marching through the streets is not the most effective use of our time, especially if you're already an architect, you're already a lawyer, even if you just have a steady job as a bus driver. Here in Canada, bus drivers are paid quite well. Probably your capacity to make a positive difference in the world is not going to be marching down the streets holding signs. So, yeah, those were questions already being asked 200 years ago, and we're still asking them today.
May very well work, and I'm going to relate it to what I ended the last conversation we had. Imagine if the local police department, fire department, the local hospitals, the local doctors, the local school teachers, imagine if just some of them were vegan. I think, I don't know, I actually really like what you said there. What was his name again? The French?
Louis-Auguste Blanqui. Blanqui is his last name.
Blanqui.
Yeah.
I learned a little something today. And I think that's, I don't know. It does make a little bit of sense to me.
Yeah.
I think we can't present ourselves as conspiracists.
Yeah, no, I know. The word conspiracy is frightening for a real reason. But I think, the other sense in which I would use it, this is nothing to do with Blanqui, but I think the other kind of conspiracy we get into in our culture is at any school you go to, some of the teachers smoke cigarettes. Yeah. But they're trying to hide it. They'll never smoke in front of the kids. Now, I don't think there's a law. I don't think the government decreed that. I don't think their boss would directly fire them, but their boss would probably talk to them. Like, look, you can't. I understand you haven't quit smoking, but you gotta go up on the roof or something. You have to, And I've seen that. I've seen that even at schools for adults. I was at a school in Germany, learning German, and the youngest people there were university students, and the oldest people were 50. It was all adult students, but still, the teachers who smoked, would try to hide it. I think that's also a kind of conspiracy. And I hope within my lifetime we start to see that with veganism, where it's like, oh, look, you still eat meat? Okay, don't do it in front of the kids. You know what I mean? And it's shallow and it's deep at the same time. Because once people recognize that it's wrong, it doesn't mean I'm going to fire you. Like, you smoke cigarettes, you're my employee. Look, I'm going to try to work this out, but you and I have to have a common understanding. This is something bad. This is something unfortunate. This is something we as a society are trying to manage in our transition. And the transition is, when you watch fucking Star Trek, when you watch Star Wars, any of these, in the future, nobody's smoking cigarettes, right?
Yeah.
It's a really deep assumption, even though Star Wars is shallow, don't get me wrong. But this reflects, okay, we're going through a transitional period. We smoked for a couple hundred years. We figured out tobacco is bad for us. There's some kind of transition. And whatever. I mean, in the future, all this stuff is going to exist in reality.
The transition right here.
Right. Yeah.
But I hear what you're saying, yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, to me...
I always like that analogy you make between cigarettes and eating meat in the future.
But to me, that's another kind of conspiracy we engage in. Where it's just look, we all admit this is wrong. We all admit this is a problem. So now how can we do something positive about it? And, it's a kind of conspiracy. It's a kind of, cooperative effort. Even if it's just, the different teachers at the school making an excuse while Mr. Schuster goes down the hallway and smokes on fire escape. It's a conspiracy of sorts.